I was halfway through my third round of chemotherapy when I noticed it, just a flicker on the screen of my phone, subtle as a shadow passing over light. I had been scrolling through messages, trying to distract myself from the nauseating chemical drip crawling through the fore in my arm. My fingertips were pale. My lips cracked. Everything about me felt weak. But that moment, it woke something. I opened my banking app out of habit, not expecting much. I had stopped looking forward to anything recently. But as soon as it loaded, my pulse changed. My eyes zeroed in on one number, $346,000. Gone. Withdrawn in one full sweep. My throat tightened. I tapped the transaction. The app took a second longer than usual to load the details, almost as if it knew the truth sitting behind that transfer was a blade waiting to split me open. Silas Kane. My stomach dropped. It wasn't just any name, it was a name that had been hovering around my wife, Ariella, like perfume you couldn't quite scrub off. She had introduced him a few months back as someone from her wellness circle, someone who specialized in grief energy realignment. Whatever that meant. He helps people who carry emotional weight, she said once. I remember the way she said people. Not us. Not you. People. I didn't think much of it then, because I was too busy throwing up every 2 hours and trying to figure out how to keep my white blood cell count above fatal. I didn't have the strength to chase ghosts. But now the ghost had a bank account, with my money in it. I didn't make a sound. The beeping from the chemo machine filled the silence. I sat there, blinking at the glowing screen, the transfer confirmation bright like a branding iron. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. I wanted to tear the fore out of my arm, but I didn't move. I just stared, then blinked again. Then I whispered her name. Ariella. It wasn't a curse. It wasn't an accusation. It was something softer. Sadder. Like saying goodbye to something that had already left. She had always been beautiful in that curated, effortless way, long braids that danced across her back when she moved. Eyes that could convince you fire was water. She knew how to say the right things in public, the supportive wife speeches, the Instagram posts tagged with #LoveAndLight and #HealingTogether. People adored us. They said I was lucky, that she was a goddess for standing by me. And I believed them. Or maybe I just wanted to. Because who wants to admit that the woman holding your hand at the hospital has already put her heart, and now your money, in someone else's pocket? The nurses came in to check the machine, to ask me how I felt, but their voices sounded like static. I nodded at the right times, answered in monosyllables. I waited until I was alone again. Then I opened our text thread. I scrolled back through her messages. Just going to Silas's for breathwork. Silas says you should focus on vibrational healing today. Silas thinks your anger is blocking your progress. Silas says. Silas thinks. Silas. Like a damn mantra. It wasn't just the money. It was the clarity it brought. Every lie untangled itself with surgical precision in my brain. The late nights. The retreat weekends. The days she forgot to pick up my meds and then blamed the pharmacy. The time she said her phone died and couldn't answer my call, but posted a selfie from a rooftop lounge with a caption that said Healing Spaces. I thought she meant her friends. I didn't know she meant him. My thumb hovered over the call button. I didn't press it. What was I going to say? That I saw the transfer? That I knew? No, that wasn't how this was going to go. I had learned something in the past few months. Chemotherapy teaches you patience. Teaches you to sit still with pain and wait. I'd waited through sleepless nights, endless scans, the suffocating fear that my body was becoming my enemy. I could wait a little longer to see just how deep this betrayal went. I put my phone down on the plastic tray table beside me. My hand was shaking. Not from the chemo this time, but from something deeper, grief, fury, humiliation all woven into one. And beneath it all, something sharp and cold, resolve. This wasn't just about Ariella's betrayal. It was about what she thought of me. That I would die slow, fade quietly, never notice. That she could siphon money from the man she married as he withered in a recliner and never pay the price. The thing is, I used to be sharp. Before cancer hollowed me out, I ran numbers like poetry. I was a financial strategist for legacy clients, built portfolios that outlasted death. I once helped a tech startup go from garage to NASDAQ in 14 months. People used to say I had a mind that never blinked. That man wasn't dead yet. He was just buried under scars and saline bags. I picked up the phone again, but this time I opened a different contact, Francis Dane. My lawyer. My longtime friend. The man who handled my will and trust before I got sick. I typed a simple message. We need to talk. Urgent. Then I sat back in the recliner, the chemical drip still coursing through me, and looked at the ceiling. This fight wasn't just about my cells anymore. It was about my name, my dignity, my legacy. And if Ariella and Silas thought they could gut me while I was too weak to notice, they were about to learn something else about cancer patients. We don't die easy. We die watching, listening, waiting for the exact moment to strike. And sometimes, we don't die at all. We rise. In the beginning, she was gentle. Ariella's hand used to fit perfectly around mine, warm and steady, like she believed in some way she could keep me grounded while everything inside me was falling apart. I remember the way she used to look at me during the early appointments, like if she blinked too long, she might miss something important. She cried quietly the first time I shaved my head, standing behind me in the bathroom, holding the razor like it was a funeral tool. I told her it was okay, that I'd rather be bald than dead. She laughed then and kissed the top of my head, whispering, "We'll fight this. Together." I believed her. Every word. But something shifted. Not all at once. More like erosion. Subtle. Silent. At first, she stopped making breakfast. She said the kitchen made her nauseous now, all those hospital smells and sterilized containers leaking into our space. Then she stopped driving me to chemo, saying the parking garage gave her headaches. I told her I understood. I lied. Of course I noticed. I noticed when her scent changed. When she stopped wearing the perfume I gave her on our anniversary. When her phone faced down more often than not. When she started saying things like, "I need space to breathe, and the energy in this house is just heavy." I was the heaviness. I knew it. She didn't have to say it. But eventually, she did. One afternoon, I came home from an infusion feeling like I had been scraped out with a spoon. I collapsed on the couch, expecting silence, rest. Instead, there was a man's voice coming from the kitchen. Soft. Too soft. I dragged myself up, thinking maybe it was a contractor or delivery person. But no, it was Silas. Long, lean, fake smile Silas. Standing there barefoot, sipping herbal tea like he lived there. Ariella introduced him like it was nothing. "This is Silas. He's a support consultant. He's going to help us through this phase." Us. I wanted to ask what part of us he was helping, but I didn't have the strength to argue. I was fighting to stay alive. So I nodded. I shook his hand. His skin was warm and dry, like someone who had never touched anything inconvenient in his life. He smiled like he knew a secret. I hated that smile immediately. Silas became a fixture. He wasn't always there physically, but his presence lingered in everything. Ariella began quoting him like scripture. Silas says you need to vocalize your gratitude every morning. Silas says chemo blocks your energetic alignment. Silas says pain is resistance, and you need to release it. Sometimes I wanted to scream. But instead, I stared out the window and let the silence swallow me. The first time she stayed out overnight, she didn't even try to lie. "I needed to sleep somewhere with higher vibration," she said. That was the term she used. Higher vibration. As if I were a dying frequency dragging her soul down. I remember staring at her as she packed a small duffel bag, folding silk pajamas and organic toothpaste with this eerie calmness. "Where are you going?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Silas has a meditation loft," she said. "He said I could use it." I didn't argue. Not out loud. But something snapped in me that night. I lay awake in our bed, the one we'd picked out together after touring 7 showrooms, and stared at the empty space beside me. I replayed every night we had spent curled into each other, every fight we made up from, every future we planned. And now, a stranger was breathing in that space. Wearing my robe, maybe, drinking from my glass, touching what was mine. No, what used to be mine. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was spiritual. It was her pretending that I was still the center of her universe while she gradually shifted her orbit around someone else. And worse, she made me question my own instincts, gaslighting me with emotional wellness talk. One night, when I asked her why she hadn't come to the last 2 appointments, she said, "I can't be around that kind of decay every week, Miles. It's suffocating. I need to stay whole if I'm going to hold space for you." That phrase, hold space, felt like a knife dipped in honey. And I let her say it. I let her say everything. The money started vanishing slowly at first. At first, I thought maybe the bills were high, or maybe I miscalculated something in a haze of prescriptions. But it kept happening. A few thousand here, 10,000 there. I began to track it. And every time I followed the digital trail, it led to places that had nothing to do with me. wellness retreats, supplements, crystal therapy, breathwork intensives, all charged to the joint account. I tried to tell myself it was stress, that she was just coping in her own way, until I found a wire transfer that had nothing to do with her healing. $346,000. Silas Kane. My name on the account. My inheritance fueling their affair. It was my mother's money, left for me with a letter she wrote by hand while her fingers trembled from Parkinson's. Use this if life ever demands something more than your income can offer, she'd written. Not for comfort, for survival. And here it was. Bled out in silence while I was being poisoned in a clinic, just trying to buy another year, another season, another morning. That night, Ariella came home humming, like she had no idea that the man in our house was unraveling quietly. She leaned over to kiss my forehead and asked if I wanted tea. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something terrifying. She didn't see me anymore. Not the man, not the husband, not the patient. I was already a ghost in her world. And Silas was the seer. But ghosts don't sleep. And ghosts, when cornered, don't forgive. Silas Kane made smoothie bowls like a priest preparing communion. He treated the process like a sacred ritual, chia seeds layered like a mosaic, spirals of honey drawn with precise flicks of the wrist, fresh-cut dragon fruit and spirulina powder blended to a shade of green that looked like envy. The first time I saw him do it, I was sitting on the couch with a blanket over my legs and a dry mouth from chemo. He didn't even glance in my direction. Just stood there in our kitchen, my kitchen, humming some soft, tuneless melody while Ariella filmed him with her phone. She laughed when he splashed almond milk on the counter. That soft, airy laugh she used to save for me. Silas says colors heal, she told me when she handed me one of the bowls. I stared at it, bright, gorgeous, and completely unappetizing to a man who hadn't kept anything down in 48 hours. I managed to mumble thanks and placed it on the table beside me. She didn't even notice. She was too busy posting a story about morning grounding with vibrational food. He was in the background, posing like it was a magazine spread. And me? I was furniture in my own house. It was surreal, watching someone steal your life, not with force, but with charm. That was Silas. Always smiling. Always centering. He never raised his voice, never insulted me directly. But there was something predatory in his calm, like a lion lounging before a pounce. He always stood too close to her, touched her back when she walked past, made her laugh with inside jokes. He talked to me like I was a guest overstaying his welcome. When I tried to assert myself, asked about bills, or suggested we sell the second car to manage treatment costs, he'd gently interrupt. "Brother, you need to focus on your healing," he said once, hand on my shoulder. "Let go of the worldly concerns. Stress multiplies sickness." That was the moment I realized I wasn't supposed to speak anymore. I was supposed to be still, quiet, accepting. I was the sick husband, fading in the background while Silas moved in on stage. Ariella began parroting his nonsense like it was gospel. "You need to detach emotionally to truly heal, Miles." That one hit hard. Not because of the words, but because of how easily they came out of her mouth. She used to be all fire and conviction. When we met, she was a law student who challenged professors in class debates and once told off a judge during a summer internship because she believed in principle over procedure. Now, she sat cross-legged on yoga cushions talking about moon cycles and inner realignment like some diluted version of herself. Only, I was starting to realize maybe it wasn't delusion. Maybe this was who she really was, who she wanted to be, once I became too heavy to carry. The moments that hurt the most were the small ones. The time I asked her to help me clip my nails because the trimmer in my hand had gotten worse, and she said, "I have a sound bath scheduled. Can it wait?" The time she forgot to reorder one of my medications, left me without it for 3 days, because she was off in some retreat and Silas had her phone. She apologized afterward. Said she was overwhelmed. Said she thought I had become too dependent. And I believed her. That's the worst part. For a little while, I believed maybe I had. But then I started seeing the money disappear. It started with the little things, Amazon purchases for things I never saw, Venmo transfers marked as consulting, payments to accounts I didn't recognize. At first, I thought maybe Ariella was booking therapy or wellness services for herself to cope. That would have made sense. I was dying, and she was flailing. But it escalated. Week by week, the numbers grew. She wasn't just spending, she was diverting, redirecting, leading funds from our accounts like it was routine. And all of it was tied back to Silas. Every damn transaction. I went digging. Between rounds of chemo and nausea that turned my insides to liquid, I'd sit with my laptop and pore through statements. I found PayPal invoices from fake companies. I found a wellness business registered in Silas's name receiving monthly payments, sometimes as much as $30,000. I traced one of the bank accounts back to an investment firm in the Caymans. The deeper I went, the more it felt like peeling back layers of rot in what I thought was a solid home. And at the center of all of it was the same man who made smoothie bowls in my house and called me brother. The inheritance my mother left me. It was meant to be sacred. I had never touched it, not even during our early years of struggle. I used to joke with Ariella that we'd give it to our kids one day to start their own lives without the chains we had. That money was from my mother's life insurance and the sale of her family home. It was everything she saved after surviving 2 abusive marriages and a life of hard, lonely work. She told me once, with her voice cracking, "Promise me you'll use this when life gives you the kind of problem that love alone can't fix." This was that problem. And Ariella, my wife, the woman who once sat with me under the stars dreaming of a modest retirement in Bali, was selling me out from under my own skin. One night, I confronted her. My hands were trembling from medication, but I stood at the edge of our bedroom while she packed a weekend bag and said, "Do you want to tell me why Silas got $15,000 from our account last week?" She didn't flinch. She barely blinked. She zipped the bag, turned to me, and said, "Because he's helping us restructure our energy. You wouldn't understand." And that was it. No guilt. No panic. Just cool dismissal. She walked out, and I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door long after it closed. And in that silence, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did something far more dangerous. I started planning. I used to think betrayal felt like a blade to the chest. Sharp, sudden, devastating. But that night, sitting alone in our bedroom while Ariella was off at her so-called breathwork circle, I realized betrayal feels more like dust, slow and suffocating. You don't notice it until everything around you is coated in it. Until the air feels thick. Until the light bends wrong. I hadn't planned to go through her laptop. I really hadn't. But when she left it open on the kitchen island, still logged in, glowing in the dark like it wanted me to see what was hidden, I took it as a sign. Not a moral one. A survival one. I sat down slowly. My body was in constant negotiation with itself these days, stiff limbs, aching joints, nausea that came and went like a ghost. But my mind was clear. That was all I had left. And I was going to use it. At first, it was the usual emails about energy retreats, meditation calendars, digital receipts for obscure supplements I couldn't pronounce. I skimmed, looking for keywords. Then, in a folder labeled simply Wellness Retreats, I found something unexpected. A lease. A PDF with clean formatting and highlighted clauses. My eyes scanned quickly. Monthly payment, $7,800. Location, downtown, Lakeview. Leaseholder, Silas Kane. Cosigner, Ariella Monroe. I stared at it for a full minute. Let it settle into my bones. Not a booking. Not a rental for a weekend. A lease. A 2-bedroom apartment with a balcony view of the lake. Stainless steel appliances. Hardwood floors. A space built for 2. For them. I kept reading. I saw payment confirmations attached to the document, transfers from our joint account to a property management company. Ariella had set up autopay. 6 months in advance. It wasn't temporary. This wasn't a getaway. It was a plan. I closed the folder slowly and leaned back in the chair. My stomach didn't lurch this time. My hands didn't shake. That part of me had gone quiet. Numb. There's something about hitting rock bottom emotionally that turns the world into math. Numbers. Logic. Transactions. I was staring at my name, my money, my wife's signature, and all of it equated to one truth. They were waiting for me to die. They weren't even pretending anymore. My breath was shallow. I stared at the screen and thought about how easily I could have missed this. If I hadn't glanced at that banking app during chemo, if she had remembered to log out, if I had been just a little more trusting, a little more desperate to believe she still cared. But now the curtain was pulled back. I could see them for who they were. They weren't planning to leave me. They were planning to replace me. And for a moment, just a moment, I wanted to die, not out of grief, but out of spite. Just to ruin their timing. Just so they wouldn't get what they wanted so easily. But then something inside me shifted. Not rage. Not revenge. Something colder. Quieter. A blueprint. They thought I'd fade quietly, drifting into the background like a dimmed light. But they didn't know I had other plans. I clicked open a blank folder and labeled it Nightfall. It was a word that came to me suddenly, without explanation. It felt right. Final. I began dragging files into it. The lease, the payment logs, the bank transfers, the screenshots. Every document I could find that tied them together. Every piece of evidence that proved they weren't just morally bankrupt. They were legally compromised. I worked in financial planning for 15 years. I'd buried people in spreadsheets before. I knew how to build an airtight case. But this wasn't about building a case. Not yet. This was about control. For the first time in months, I felt it returning. Slowly, inch by inch, like breath-filling collapsed lungs. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional car outside. I imagined them in that apartment, cooking, laughing, maybe even sleeping in a bed bought with my money. I pictured Silas standing on the balcony, looking out at the water, sipping some organic tea while Ariella called herself a survivor for leaving behind a toxic chapter. That's what she'd call me. A chapter. But chapters can be rewritten. That night, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year. Francis Dane. My attorney. My friend. The executor of my trust. He picked up on the third ring, voice groggy. Francis. It's Miles. There was a pause. Then, Miles. Damn. You okay? No, I said. But I'm awake now. I didn't tell him everything then. Just enough to get his attention. I told him I needed help organizing some financial documentation. I told him I was building a folder. He didn't ask questions. Francis never asked until he was sure I was ready. That's why I trusted him. After the call, I lay down on the couch instead of the bed. I couldn't bring myself to go back in there. Not that night. I kept thinking about the lease. About how easy it had been for her to sign something permanent with him while I was fighting for my life. I didn't sleep much. My mind kept looping scenes that hadn't happened yet. Ariella discovering the account freezes I would soon implement. Silas finding out the condo wasn't his to sell. The two of them realizing too late that I wasn't just dying, I was watching, listening, preparing. There's a particular cruelty and betrayal by someone who once made vows in your ear. But there's also a strange kind of power in it. It strips away all illusions, all niceties. It leaves behind only what's real. And what was real now was that I had nothing left to lose and everything to take back. Let them keep their balcony view. Let them pour their alkaline smoothies and chant about frequencies and light. They thought I was drifting away, but I was just recalibrating. They wanted peace. I was going to give them war. There's a calm that settles over you when you realize you're no longer waiting to be saved. I felt it the morning after I discovered the lease. Quiet, deliberate, precise. I wasn't shocked anymore. Shock had given way to clarity. And with clarity came action. The folder on my desktop was still named Nightfall. That wasn't poetic anymore. It was practical. Everything they had hidden, I would drag into the light and organize with the kind of detail I once applied to multi-million-dollar investment audits. I didn't just want to catch them. I wanted to suffocate their schemes with their own paper trail. I started with the bank statements. There were patterns. Regular transfers marked as energy services or consulting support. At first glance, they looked legitimate. But the amounts were inconsistent, and the frequency was too erratic for an actual service provider. Every payment was carefully placed just days before or after my chemotherapy sessions. When my defenses were lowest, they moved fastest. Silas was never sloppy, I'll give him that. But arrogance always leaves fingerprints. I matched each payment against dates from Ariella's calendar app, which she foolishly kept synced to the cloud. Retreat in Sedona. Cleanse weekend in Big Sur. Tantric energy reset in Tulum. The locations were sprinkled across states and countries, all paid for with joint assets. And nearly all of them included photos. There she was, in white linens, eyes closed, arms raised to some invisible sky god while I sat at home fighting for breath, wondering if I'd live long enough to see the next week. I saved every image. Every one of her smiles in another man's proximity. Some were cropped too tightly. Others showed more than she realized. One had Silas's watch visible, my watch. The Rolex my mother gave me after I landed my first major client. She said, "Wear it when you want the room to know who you are." And now here it was, on the wrist of the man easing into my life like a snake through tall grass. I added that photo to the folder. Next came the fake invoices. Silas had created an LLC, Kane Vitality Services. It looked real enough. Business registration, fake testimonials, a clean logo. But Francis helped me pull the registration docs. It was a shell. No physical address. No operating license. No tax ID with active status. A house of cards. And Ariella had wired over $170,000 to this ghost business in the past 5 months. That money wasn't being spent. It was being laundered, hidden, protected from me. I shared the files with Francis piece by piece. We didn't speak on the phone often. He said it was better we kept this offline. He was right. He handled my estate documents, my living trust, and my power of attorney, all drafted after my second round of chemo. He'd seen what people do when death sits on the doorstep. He'd seen how quiet betrayal can be. When I sent him the lease, the wire records, the company profile, and the inheritance breach, he called me immediately. Jesus, Miles. This isn't just personal. It's criminal. I know, I said, but I don't want revenge. He paused. No. I want accuracy. I want to give them exactly what they signed up for. Francis cleared his throat. Then we'll start the documentation chain. I'll secure your inheritance accounts and freeze anything joint. We'll treat this as marital asset fraud. Good. And the trust? I looked out the window. I want it locked. Rewritten so she gets nothing now or later. If something happens to me, everything goes to the Children's Hospital Fund. Every cent. He sighed softly, the kind of sigh that only comes from watching good men be broken slowly. You sure? She already took my trust in her. She doesn't need the paperwork, too. I didn't sleep that night. I wasn't anxious. I was building. Nightfall had become more than a folder. It was a strategy. I created subfolders. One for legal documentation. One for media evidence. One for financial records. One for screenshots, texts between Ariella and Silas that I retrieved from our shared cloud backups. She had backed up her iMessages once and never disabled the sync. I wasn't proud of how I found them, but I wasn't interested in pride anymore. Pride didn't matter when your life had become a ledger of losses. Some of the messages made my stomach turn. Ariella, he looks worse every day. It's like watching a tree rot from the inside. Silas, he won't be around much longer. Just hold on. The timing matters. Ariella, when it's done, we can finally breathe. When it's done. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were counting on it. And if that's how they wanted to play this, like my death was a door they could walk through with fresh skin and no consequences, they were going to find the locks changed and the hinges rigged. I printed hard copies of everything. Francis told me to back them up 3 ways: cloud, encrypted drive, and physical folders stored in his firm's vault. I followed it like scripture. I moved slower these days. Everything took more energy. But with every document I scanned, labeled, or compiled, I felt less like a patient and more like a man again. The version of me that used to run teams and negotiate $10 million deals over lunch. The version who used to be the most prepared man in any room. Cancer had taken my hair, my strength, my sense of time, but not my mind. Not yet. I tucked the physical copy of the Nightfall folder into a black envelope and sealed it. On the front, I wrote a single word: execute. Not if, when. The plan wasn't finished. Not yet. But the bones were there. Strong. Clean. Sharp. Let Ariella keep smiling into her phone, chasing her spiritual awakening with the man wearing my clothes and spinning my legacy. Let her talk about healing and detachment and vibrational integrity. Because when nightfall arrived, and it wouldn't be with fireworks or shouts. It would be quiet. Like ink spreading across white paper. Like a judge's gavel falling on a padded desk. That was the night I remembered who I was. Not a victim. Not a ghost. But a man who never left anything unfinished. The first time Joey and I met, it was in a courtroom parking lot where I testified on his behalf during a corporate liability suit. He'd been framed by a client trying to bury their own insurance fraud. I helped exonerate him with a single folder of clean, chronological data. That was 7 years ago. I never asked him for anything after that day. I didn't have to. When I texted him 2 weeks ago, all I wrote was, "I need eyes. Quiet ones." His reply came in under 2 minutes. Send an address. I'm yours. He arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, pulling up in a dusty gray pickup like any contractor. Baseball cap, sunglasses, coffee in hand. He looked older, but sharper somehow. Less like a man off the grid and more like a man who'd become the grid. I met him at the gate and opened it myself. Still got that license? I asked. He gave me a look and patted the side of his bag. Still know how to disappear? I added. He grinned. You'll forget I was ever here. We installed 3 cameras. One in the living room vent, angled perfectly at the couch and kitchen. One tucked above the doorway, just behind a piece of crown molding. And one in the bedroom smoke detector. Discreet. Motion triggered. High definition. Audio included. They didn't record to a cloud. They recorded to a hard drive Joey embedded in the back of the hallway cabinet. A cabinet I told Ariella I was having sealed due to mold concerns. She never asked twice. For 3 days, I got nothing. Just empty rooms and silence. Ariella stayed out most nights. Silas didn't show. I started to think maybe I'd installed them too late. Maybe they were smarter than I gave them credit for. But on the 4th night, I got a motion alert while I was lying on the couch, a thin blanket covering my legs, for ports still sore from the day's treatment. I tapped into the feed with a trembling finger. And there they were, my wife and the man she was willing to gamble her soul on. She came in first, barefoot, wearing the gray sweater I bought her last Christmas. Silas followed close behind, holding a bottle of something expensive. He kissed her neck as they passed the hallway. They laughed together, too loud, too familiar. Like it was their house. Like I was already gone. They sat on the couch. She curled her legs beneath her like she used to do when we had late-night talks about baby names. He poured 2 glasses and handed her one. She leaned into him. I still can't believe it's working, she whispered. The transfers, the setup, the lease, all of it. Silas smirked. Of course it's working. He trusts you. He's focused on surviving, not suspecting. That's what illness does to people. It turns them into shadows of themselves. Ariella nodded slowly, tracing her finger along the rim of her glass. It's like he's already gone. And once this next transfer clears. How much this time? Silas asked. $212, she said. He's signing it tomorrow. The Toronto clinic. The one with the what did you call it? Experimental immunotherapy, Silas replied. No license, no board. Just a shell site and a ghost phone number. By the time anyone asks questions, he'll either be dead or too far gone to notice. I paused the feed. My lungs refused to work for a moment. I stared at the screen, at the way she smiled as she said it. At how casual they were, how clinical. Like I was a business acquisition they were finalizing. The last deposit before closing. I hit play again. Ariella leaned forward and whispered something I had to replay twice to catch. You won't be around much longer. She said it like she was planning dinner. Like it was just another item on her to-do list. I watched Silas press a kiss to her temple and murmur, that last transfer went through. It's almost time. That's when I stopped watching. I didn't need more. I had everything. Their voices, their faces, their plans. I backed up the file to the Nightfall folder, then made a copy for Francis. I sent it without a message. He'd know what to do. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't punch walls or curl up in a ball like I had during those early diagnosis days. I felt something colder, more surgical. I was holding the knife now. They just didn't know it. The next morning, Ariella walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. Her eyes were bright, her smile wide. She made tea, asked me if I slept, said we had a big day ahead. I watched her pour hot water over lemon slices and said nothing. Let her talk about scheduling, treatment, and next steps. I signed the form she gave me without blinking, the one authorizing the wire to the fake Toronto clinic. She kissed my cheek after I signed it. I waited until she left, then called Francis. Wire it, I said, but route it through your firm. Let them attempt to withdraw. Understood, he said. He paused for a second. You okay? I looked out the window, watching sunlight hit the fence. Not yet, I said. But soon. Joey came by again that evening to check the drive. He pulled the data onto a secure flash and wiped the local logs. This is a federal-level setup now, he said. She's cooked. They both are. Joey looked at me then, long and hard. You want me to keep going? No, I said. Now we let them dig their own graves. He nodded and left without another word. I sat in that quiet house for a long time, thinking about all the things I believed about love, about commitment, about trust, and how none of them mattered when the person across from you decided to see you as temporary. I had spent months thinking I was dying. They had spent those same months planning a life without me, one funded by me, one built on the assumption that I'd be too weak, too broken to fight back. But they forgot something. Cancer doesn't just make you vulnerable. It makes you sharp. It strips away every lie, every excuse, every illusion. It turns you into someone who sees everything. And once you see it all, there's no going back. They had handed me the rope, and I was done waiting. I was going to pull. The form she handed me was printed on ivory stock paper, neatly clipped together in a smooth faux leather folder like it had come straight from a real clinic. Her voice trembled slightly when she explained it to me, like she was emotional about giving me hope. She said, "Miles, this could be it. A breakthrough therapy. It's in Toronto. They don't advertise much, only accept referrals." She looked down, then up again, just the right amount of pause. "It's expensive, but what if it works?" I studied her for a moment, not saying a word. Her sweater was cream-colored, her nails French-tipped, not a single chip. Her hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, soft and polished. She looked like a woman who had been sleeping well, eating well, living well, and she was talking to me like she was still my wife, like she still belonged to my life instead of orbiting around it like a thief disguised in silk. "How much?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. She exhaled, like it hurt to say it. $212,000. They require full upfront payment to begin the immunotherapy sequence. But Miles, they've had results in patients worse off than you. I looked into it. I really believe she reached for my hand, squeezing it softly. I believe this could give us a future. I looked down at her hand on mine. I thought about all the nights I used to believe the same thing. "I'll think about it," I said. She didn't push. That's how I knew she was lying. When Ariella told the truth, she argued. She'd debate her point like a lawyer cross-examining the universe. When she lied, she became soft, delicate, a woman who gently nudged rather than demanded. She only did that when she wanted me to say yes without making her work for it. The moment she left the house, I called Francis. "Send me what you've got," he said. I forwarded every scanned document, every page of the application, the contact information, and the so-called physician's letter that had no signature or license number. Francis and his team got to work fast. By the next day, I had answers. "No such clinic exists," Francis said flatly. The address listed is a co-working space that rents mailboxes. No medical license on file for the doctor named. The phone number routes through a call forwarding service in Belize. The email domain is brand new, registered last month. I sat in silence on the other end of the call. Francis didn't stop. "Miles, this wasn't just a lie. This was premeditated fraud. She's manufacturing your illness into a withdrawal schedule. If we hadn't caught this, she would have funneled that money directly into Silas's Cayman account." I nodded slowly. "We wire the money." Francis paused. "You sure?" "We wire it," I said. "Through your firm. Let them think they won. Let them touch it." "Understood." I ended the call and sat by the window for a long time, watching a leaf tumble across the lawn like it had nowhere left to land. I wondered if they practiced the lie, Ariella and Silas. I wondered if they sat side by side in their Lakeview condo going over the lines. If he coached her on which phrases to use, which facial expressions to wear. Maybe they laughed about it afterward. Maybe they toasted to it. To the final transfer, I imagined him saying, lifting a glass of organic red wine. "To freedom," she'd answer. That night, Ariella came home with takeout. My favorite, Thai from the corner spot we used to walk to in our early years. She lit candles. She asked how I was feeling. Said she was proud of me for being brave enough to consider the treatment. I wanted to throw the food across the room. I wanted to scream that I knew everything, that I had watched her, listened to her whisper my expiration date into another man's neck. But I didn't. I ate 2 bites, smiled weakly, told her I was tired, let her tuck me into bed like I was the child and she the caretaker. Her hand rested lightly on my chest for a few seconds, as if rehearsing a gesture of love. Then she left the room and closed the door. I waited until I heard her in the shower. Then I got up, walked slowly to my office, and opened the Nightfall folder. I watched the camera feed from earlier that day, watched her adjust her blouse before coming into the room, watched her practice her expression in the mirror on the hallway wall. She had smiled at. I fast-forwarded to the clip from 2 days earlier, her on the phone with Silas. He's going to sign it. He won't ask questions. He's desperate. He's clinging to hope like a crutch. And Silas, always cool, make sure it goes through clean. Once it lands, we vanish. No more delays. Francis called me the next morning. We routed the funds into a traceable conduit. They attempted to access it. We froze the transaction. I've drafted the fraud report. It's airtight. I closed my eyes, letting the words sit. "You want me to file it?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how far she'll go. How far down the lie she's willing to crawl." He didn't argue. He knew I wasn't just after legal justice. I was after full clarity. I needed to watch her choose this. Over and over. I needed her to walk herself into the fire, not just stumble into it. That evening, Ariella came to me with tears in her eyes. She said, "They received the wire. They're prepping the schedule. You're going to Toronto next week." I looked at her carefully. No cracks. No stutters. She had fully stepped into the role now, devoted wife, hopeful survivor, reluctant realist. "You saved me," I whispered. And she cried harder. But I didn't believe a single tear. Because this wasn't love. This was strategy. And she was about to find out mine was stronger. They left for their retreat on a Saturday morning. Ariella wore her favorite linen wrap, that burnt ochre one she only brought out for weekends she wanted to post about on Instagram, barefoot healing, soul realignment, curated happiness. She floated around the house that morning like she was cleansing it with her presence, not a trace of guilt in her. Silas didn't even bother pretending anymore. He picked her up in his white Tesla, music humming low, windows down, his arm already resting across her seat like the claim had long been established. I watched them from the guest room window as they pulled away. She didn't look back. The second they were out of sight, I moved. Every motion in my body was precise, measured. My joints ached, but my focus was pure. I picked up the phone and called Francis. "It's time," I said. "Understood," he replied. Within the hour, every legal string we'd prepared for weeks was pulled tight. Francis filed the fraud complaint with the Financial Crimes Division. Wire fraud, identity misrepresentation, misappropriation of marital funds, breach of trust. Simultaneously, the joint accounts were frozen. Inheritance accounts, too. Every dollar she tried to maneuver was now locked in place like a bear trap. Next came the lease on the Lakeview condo, flagged for financial misrepresentation. The property manager received a formal alert from Francis's office with documentation of the ongoing investigation. The condo could no longer be sold, rented, or transferred. It became dead property. Just like that. Then we hit the credit lines. Ariella's personal cards, frozen. Any card tied to my name? Closed. I secured the house deed under legal seal, protecting it from any potential attempts to mortgage or leverage it while I was away in that fictitious Toronto clinic. Every legal thread they tried to pull now led to brick walls and trapdoors. I changed the locks that afternoon. Hired a locksmith who didn't ask questions and tipped well. I wanted something that clicked heavy, something that would ring in her ears when the key failed. I even replaced the keypad entry she always bragged about installing herself. Code wiped. System reset. Doorbell cam installed and routed directly to my phone. I wanted to see her face when she returned to a home that no longer opened for her. But the note, that was the final move. I left it taped dead center on the front door, printed in plain font, no signature. "You mistook silence for surrender. That was your final mistake." Just one line. No anger. No explanation. Just the truth. I didn't wait long for the fallout. They returned late Sunday night, faces flushed from the high of a weekend spent luxuriating in their imagined victory. The security cam alerted me as soon as they stepped onto the porch. Ariella reached into her purse and pulled out her key, her movements still slow and graceful like she was entering a spa, not the home of a man she'd drained. Click. Nothing. She tried again. The lock didn't move. She turned toward the keypad and paused. Her fingers hovered like she suddenly realized something was wrong. She entered the code. Red light. Again. Red light. Again. Locked out. Then she saw the note. I watched in real time as she read it, her face freezing like someone had thrown ice water on her lungs. She read it twice. Then a third time. Silas hovered behind her, confused, squinting. When she stepped aside and he read it himself, his smirk slipped for the first time. They stood there for a moment, side by side, realizing the house they thought they had gutted and rearranged had been fortified without them. Ariella tried calling me within 30 seconds. Then again. Then a third time. I let it ring. Then I silenced it. The voicemails came fast, first soft, then pleading, then angry. "Miles, what is this? Miles, you're scaring me. Miles, open the damn door." Each one sounded like a woman unraveling in real time, like someone who suddenly realized the game wasn't hers to control anymore. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I played back her whisper from the hidden camera. "He won't be around much longer." I looped it 3 times. Let it echo through my headphones as she screamed at the porch camera like the victim. They stayed out there for maybe 10 minutes, unsure of whether to break in, call the police, or keep pretending they weren't who they truly were. Eventually, Silas pulled her by the arm. They got in the car and drove off. That was the night I finally slept. Not well, not long, but it was different. There was no tension in my chest. No dreams about IVs or Ariella crying while she wiped soup from my chin. I didn't dream about being pitted. I didn't dream about being replaced. I closed my eyes and slept like a man who had reclaimed the last piece of himself that betrayal tried to take, his will. The next morning, Francis called. They tried to access the joint account again. What happened? Flagged and denied. Then Silas tried to log in under your name. That attempt was traced. He's officially crossed the threshold. And the condo? Unsaleable. Managers cooperating. They're going to feel it. I sat at the kitchen table and looked around the space. Clean counters. One mug. One plate. Quiet. Peaceful. They had wanted this house to become a tomb. They thought I'd die here quietly, surrounded by good lighting and old wedding pictures. Instead, it had become my stronghold. Ariella called again later that day, this time from a number I didn't recognize. I blocked it. She texted, "Please, can we talk? I didn't mean for it to go this far. You don't understand how alone I felt." I didn't respond. Because she was right, I didn't understand. I had been the one dying. She had been the one disappearing. Now she was alone. And I was finally, beautifully, free. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was earned. For days, the phone stayed quiet. No more pleading texts, no blocked number voicemails, no emails filled with feigned remorse and half-baked explanations. The world that had once revolved around their manipulation had tilted, and they were spinning in the wrong direction, scrambling to regain control of a game they no longer owned. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was watching everything fall. Silas vanished first. Francis was the one who told me. He tried to liquidate the condo, he said, voice calm but sharp. Filed a false power of attorney, claiming you granted him cosign rights through Ariella. Did it go through? No. The court seized the deed. It's officially frozen under fraud investigation. He tried to leave a voicemail with the property manager, called it all a misunderstanding. I could hear the smirk in Francis's tone. Where is he now? Gone. No forwarding address. His registered business website? Offline. Social scrubbed. We're tracking activity, but I'd guess he's running scared. Good. Let him. Let the man who wore my watch and slept in my sheets and drank coffee in my kitchen wake up each morning in a cheap rental somewhere, wondering if today's the day the knock on the door comes. He never expected I'd fight. They both didn't. I was supposed to be too tired, too sick, too far gone. But I wasn't gone. I was clearer than I'd ever been. Ariella tried to hang on. She pivoted, reinvented, reached out to my sister, claiming confusion. Told our mutual friends there had been a breakdown in communication and that grief distorts things. But no one was buying it anymore. The mask had slipped too far. My sister blocked her. My friends fell silent. Her family, who once smiled politely at dinners and called me a good placeholder, behind closed doors, publicly distanced themselves. I heard through one of Francis's junior partners that Ariella's own cousin removed her as maid of honor from an upcoming wedding. The cousin posted a vague caption online that read, "Some people only stay loyal as long as it's easy. I see you now." It made me laugh. Not because it was petty, but because Ariella cared deeply about appearances. She used to script the captions of our shared photos like a poet. Now, every time she opened her phone, she was met with silence or scorn. That was her currency, attention. And now, she was bankrupt. The press caught wind within a week. A quiet financial advisor undergoing cancer treatment. Robbed by his wife and her spiritual consultant in a luxury condo scam made too perfect a headline. It started local. Then financial blogs picked it up. By the time the mainstream outlets came sniffing around, Francis had already prepared a clean, controlled release of the story. No embellishment, just the truth. They didn't need my anger to make it compelling. The betrayal spoke for itself. Ariella's reputation turned to ash. Her retreat clients pulled out. One of her affiliate programs dropped her within 24 hours of the article going live. Sponsors pulled partnerships. Even her yoga instructor posted a message about severing ties with individuals who exploit illness for personal gain. I'd never even met the guy, but I almost sent him a thank you card. I was still healing. My body didn't magically bounce back because my enemies were falling. I still had to drag myself through treatments, still woke up with bone-deep fatigue and the metallic taste of drugs on my tongue. But now, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't fading. I was rebuilding. Quietly. Steadily, with every document filed and every lie exposed, I felt a little stronger. One morning, I stood by the window holding a mug of tea I'd made myself. I looked out at the porch, the same porch Ariella once stormed away from after the locks had changed, and I didn't feel haunted anymore. I felt grounded. Alone, yes, but whole. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was dying in my own home. I felt like I was returning to it. Francis called that afternoon with the update I'd been waiting for. Court date is set. Restitution hearings locked. And the charges? Fraud, misappropriation, attempted wire laundering, and conspiracy. Silas will be charged in absentia if he doesn't show. And Ariella? She's agreed to appear. Her attorney's trying to negotiate a plea. I didn't feel triumphant. Not in the movie style, fists raised in the air kind of way. I just felt resolved. Like the arc had finally bent where it needed to bend. That night, I opened the Nightfall folder one last time. I scrolled through the timeline, the screenshots, the video stills, the bank statements, the emails, the fake lease. Each file a footprint of betrayal. But I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just smiled, soft and tired, because I had built something they couldn't destroy. Not a case. Not a win. Me. They tried to bury me under lies. Tried to siphon every ounce of value from my name, my legacy, my life. But I was still here. And everything they tried to erase was standing again, taller than ever. I closed the folder and backed it up to one final drive. I labeled it Peace, because Nightfall had done its job. The storm had passed. And now it was time to rest, not because I was defeated, but because I had already won. They sat 3 rows ahead of me. Silas in a cheap charcoal suit that didn't quite fit right, and Ariella in all white, like she thought purity could be worn like a costume. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the courtroom. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun. No makeup, no accessories, just a desperate attempt to look like someone worthy of sympathy. Silas kept fidgeting. He wouldn't look back. Ariella did. Just once. Her eyes scanned the room and found me seated in the back row, dressed in a tailored navy suit, the kind that didn't just fit the body, it fit the moment. My mother's cufflinks glinted against my wrist as I straightened my sleeves. I didn't smile. I just stared until she looked away. There's something dignified about silence. People forget that. Everyone expects the wronged man to scream, to cry, to cause a scene. But I wasn't there for theatrics. I was there to watch the ending. Not with fireworks, not with rage, but with finality. The judge entered. The courtroom rose. When we all sat again, I let the weight of that moment settle into my spine. This wasn't just a hearing. It was the reckoning. The prosecutor laid out the case with methodical clarity, outlined the inheritance misappropriation, the falsified wellness transfers, the offshore accounts, the fraudulent clinic. Every word landed like a nail in a coffin. Ariella flinched once when they played the audio clip. Her voice, clear as day, saying, "He won't be around much longer." Silas stared straight ahead. His jaw flexed, but otherwise, he didn't move. I could almost feel him calculating the odds, trying to find an angle, some escape route. But there wasn't one. Francis had made sure of that. Then came their statements. Silas went first. He stood up slowly, face blank, and tried to paint himself as misled, misinformed, spiritually exploited. It was a weak performance. "Hello," he stuttered once. The judge didn't even blink. Then Ariella stood. I wasn't sure what I expected. An apology, maybe. A breakdown. But she didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just said, "I lost myself in grief." Simple. Almost convincing. And yet, as I watched her, I felt nothing. No hate. No sadness. Not even pity. Just distance. As if I was watching someone I once read about, not someone who once said forever with her hand wrapped in mine. When the verdict was read, the words didn't ring like music. They landed like punctuation. Silas, guilty of conspiracy, wire fraud, and attempted laundering. Sentencing delayed pending further investigation, but the judgment was clear. Ariella, guilty of marital asset manipulation and fraud, agreed to restitution in full. A suspended sentence pending completion of mandated restitution and formal surrender of all financial claims. The judge's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. What came next was quiet. They turned around to leave, escorted by their attorneys. Ariella looked at me again, slower this time. Her lips parted like she might say something. I held her gaze, gave her nothing. She was the one who blinked first. When they walked out, it wasn't with handcuffs or spotlights. It was worse. They walked out small. Invisible. Everything they tried to build on the bones of my suffering had collapsed, and now they were just two people no one wanted to know anymore. I waited until the room was nearly empty before I stood. Francis walked over and clapped a hand on my shoulder. "You good?" he asked. I nodded. "I will be." We didn't need to say more. Outside the courthouse, the sky was overcast, but the air was warm. The kind of day that doesn't demand anything from you. I stepped onto the sidewalk and closed my eyes for a moment. Felt the breeze across my face. I wasn't thinking about the past. I wasn't replaying the betrayal or the nights I sat in a recliner wondering if I'd ever feel like a man again. I was thinking about the future. About peace. About the quiet that comes after the war. The latest scan had come in 2 days before the hearing. I hadn't told anyone, not even Francis. I wanted to keep that moment mine. The oncologist had stared at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "You're in remission, Miles," he'd said, almost surprised. "There's no sign of progression." I had nodded. Didn't say much. I just shook his hand and walked out of that hospital like I was walking into sunlight. Now, standing outside the courtroom, I let myself feel it for the first time, not just relief, but victory. I had survived. Not just the disease, not just the betrayal, but the hollowing, the erasure. I had walked through every layer of loss, and now I stood taller, stronger, more myself than I'd ever been. I walked to the cafe across the street and sat down at a table by the window. Ordered black coffee. No sugar. The barista smiled, and I smiled back. It wasn't forced. It was real. As I waited, I opened my phone. No messages from Ariella. Nothing from Silas. Just a text from my sister. "Proud of you. Mom would be too." I stared at those words and felt my throat tighten just a little. Not in grief. In gratitude. Because that was the real win. Not the courtroom. Not the restitution. Not even the remission. It was knowing that I hadn't let them take the best parts of me. I finished my coffee slowly, watching people pass outside, rushing to meetings, carrying groceries, laughing into phones. The world didn't know what I'd survived. And it didn't need to. I knew. And that was enough. When I finally stood to leave, I adjusted my sleeves and buttoned my jacket. My mother's cufflinks caught the light again, polished, silver, carved with the initials she once told me would mean something long after she was gone. She was right. Because revenge isn't about rage. It's about rising. And I had never stood taller.